helping you with Acorn and RISCOS computing.
There we go. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes, good. So it's not that different to Teams, at least. It's just not Microsoft, so it's slightly better. All right, so I'm going to talk about, as Chris requested, some new machines. Some of them, I guess, very new, debuted on Saturday at the Mug thing, Christmas market. I'll talk a bit more about Fast and show you where things are up to with that. I'll then go on to talk about some other new stuff that's still in the offing, being worked on, nearly ready, depending on what you want to look at that. And then, I'm not sure why I did this, but I offered to host some sort of quiz unprompted. So I'm going to try and do that at the end. And I'm going to try and do that online. So you may need a browser. I have tested it, and it obviously works in the usual browsers that aren't RISCOS browsers. And it did, when I tested it yesterday, work in Iris, although obviously you're all using different devices because Iris wouldn't be able to do Zoom, I don't suppose, for the most part. So when we get to that bit, I'll explain how that bit works. And there is a genuine, tangible, real physical prize for the winner that I will have to post on, because I don't think you can sort of pass physical objects by Zoom. We're not at that Star Trek level yet, are we? All right, then. So the first thing I'll talk about is a bit about Fast and where we're up to with that. And for those of you that didn't come last time, it's left the animations on, so I might chop and change as we're doing this. Fast is about fast access to storage technology. So what we've done is we've added a SATA driver to the ROM for the Raspberry Pi, but specifically for the compute module. Now, whilst we would have liked to have built that into a standard nightly thing, told you, that's not possible because we've had to change some elements of different things in order to get it to work. So one of the things that seems to have broken for us quite a bit of late, and we've done some investigation with other people to try and work this out, is when they've enabled, for example, eMMC for the Raspberry Pi Compute Module 4, it seems to have done some damage to how it works with SD cards. So some SD cards, when I say some, I mean all of them, apart from one particular brand, seems to have broken completely. And as of last week, we discovered that all of the ones of the particular brand and the particular model aren't all the same. So we've got a really small subset of SD cards that seem to work with later ROMs, which means we've had to roll some things back in order to be able to allow people to access SD cards and or eMMC. It may well mean for the time being, until that's resolved somehow by somebody at RULE, that we end up having to do two ROMs. We've got a few users who use eMMC, and it creates them the issue that they can't see the eMMC, so they can't update any firmware. As it currently stands, people who use SD cards can do that. They can update it easily, but if we use a ROM built based on the nightly build, they'll update their firmware and then suddenly the SD card will disappear, which leaves them in that position, whereas the eMMC people will suddenly be able to see their firmware. It's a weird situation that we can't kind of work out. So for now, we've just rolled back elements of the ROM to a point where SD cards do work, because that's where the majority of the system, all of the systems we've sold as a whole, are SD card based. Some of the systems that people have built on their own using our hardware and our ROMs are eMMC based, so it's tricky for them. We went down a path of using ADFS rather than SCSI, because that allowed us to use up to 4 ports relatively easily. We made a conscious decision to do that, just because it made more sense in terms of that. And currently, FAST has an option for an external SATA port. There's a marginal issue with that, in as much as the external port will always be the first port. So if you're trying to boot from a SATA drive, and why would you not, it kind of interferes with that process, and you'd have to star configure drive 5 instead to get to the SATA. So most people aren't using the external SATA port because it doesn't make any sense. And as I've said, it's based on the compute module 4. We dare call it fast, because it's possibly the fastest RISCOS computer in the world for now. When you combine the speed of the disk access, it's faster than anything else in terms of disk access that's out and around now. And it seems to be about half the speed of direct RAM access if we use RAMFS. And it's possible, in talking to other people and having conversations about it, that file core might be the limiting factor now. I might dispel my own myth later on as we go further through, but all those things added together, to us and to independent third parties, seem to be indicating that it's the fastest RISCOS computer in the world, according to Heineken and some other people. Or was it Carlsberg? One of those. Some of the other features are within that. There are obviously, as are ordinarily related to the Pi, there's 4K screen resolutions as a standard thing. It is upgradable in as much as you can buy a 2 GB version, pop out the CM4, the compute module 4, pop one in with 4 GB. You could, if you really wanted, pop one in with 8 GB. You just wouldn't see the second 4, because the ROM currently, I don't think, allows that to appear. There is hardware acceleration for graphics built in, and it does have, through that benefit of being Raspberry Pi based, several mature Linux options if you wanted to do that. And one of the reasons that we've currently stuck to the SD card as our main part of it is it is impossible, as far as we can ascertain, to boot from a SATA drive. And the reason seems to be that in the Linux world, there are that many different SATA drivers around that they would have to build that many in. It'd be impossible to do. So we've tried multiple options to try and get Linux to boot in our standard dual boot way, and it just sits there with a flashing cursor. So the easy way is to pop out the SD card and pop a different one in that's pre-configured to what we need it to do. And as real-world examples of what it does, it compiles a Pi ROM in 3 minutes and 20 seconds on disk, and 2 minutes and 46 seconds on RAM. So you can kind of see that it's not that much slower than RAM. If you look at the benchmarks on Chris Hall's website, you'll see how that compares to other machines. The nearest one, I think last time I looked, is like a couple of minutes slower at least. And we're achieving those kind of speeds sort of on a regular basis. It's not just let's pick the best one from what we've done. That seems to be where it's roughly at. And when we had a conversation with Matthew from of RISCOSM fame, who said it compiled his map data for that program twice as fast as anything else he'd used. And we'd given him one to test when we were developing it early on, and he kind of didn't really give it back. He did give us some money as a replacement, but he sort of just kept it because he said that works for him. It makes his conversion of map data so much quicker and more efficient that why would he let us have that back? So we kind of sold one really quickly as a result of just giving it to somebody to trial. So there are some considerations in terms of how it works. If you're aware of the Compute Module 4, the Compute Module 4 boards in general, but not all, tend to have no USB 3 ports. So the official Raspberry Pi I/O board has no USB 3 ports. It has 2 built-in USB 2 ports, and it has a header for 2 further ports, but there are no USB 3 ports. And the reason being, on the Pi 4 itself, the USB 3 chip is kind of wired directly into the PCIe slot, and that's what we use for the SATA connector. So with the official I/O board, there's kind of no way around that as it stands. Some of the other boards that are available may well have a USB 3 chip on there somewhere and some other access to PCIe through whatever means they've chosen to do that. Usually, though, that's in the guise of an NVMe port rather than a PCIe port that we'd use for the SATA hardware. So the main issue with it is it needs that custom ROM build from us to be able to make it work. Just because of all those things that we've said about the modifications that we've made to some modules and the modifications we've made by rolling back some elements of the build in order to get it to work. Now, hopefully, as time goes on, we won't need to roll back quite as many things. The driver may still need to be in there specifically, but what we've said at the moment is we'll produce around 4 per year as a standard, and as of May, and this is going to sound really bad, we were on 3, and we've got the 4th one in process now. We did, as I'll explain a bit later, have a plan to wait for 5.30 because we figured that would be a more stable way of doing it, but 5.30 seems to be taking longer than we anticipated. So we've opted to build now on where we are now and issue that one now. And then if 5.30 comes along shortly, we'll do that again. One of the difficulties we had early on was the distinct lack of Compute Module 4s. At the beginning of the component shortage, Compute Module 4s were available everywhere. When Raspberry Pi started to dry up, Compute Module 4s weren't really an issue. And I was lucky in that I'd bought some in already. And then as Raspberry Pi 4s disappeared altogether, Compute Modules started to disappear. And I spotted that happening and bought some then, as well as some of the I/O boards, which are also largely unavailable as it stands. But luckily, I've got quite a few around at the minute that we can use for various things, because I could see the way it was going and thought, well, I'll get in sharpish and resolve that issue before it becomes one in terms of that. So they are gradually picking back up now, though. And if you keep an eye on the website that shows you where Raspberry Pis are available, either 4, 5, 0s or whatever, there is an increased availability of Compute Module 4s, albeit more often than not in the UK. The UK seems to be lagging behind in terms of the availability of those and where they're going. So it looks like, for whatever reason, they seem to be into the United States and mainland Europe, and we're getting the odd dribbles here and there. And one of the issues we have is we've got very specific requirements about what we want it to do. So we want either the 2 GB lights, the 4 GB lights, or for some of our other machines, the 4 GB with 32 GB of eMMC. So that is increasing, should ease up. I could just do with them starting to release some more I/O boards We're not running particularly low, but it won't be long if we're not careful. Some other considerations then. There is some easy compatibility with other boards. There are other boards around, apart from the official Raspberry Pi I/O board that works with our system. We've tested a couple of others that you just plug it in as you would in any other way, and it just works. It recognises it, it can boot from it, can do everything else. So that gives us some options in terms of we're not really as reliant on the official I/O board as we originally were. It does mean that we have to redesign some of the mounting brackets and things like that, which if we don't have to do that, let's not. If we've got mounting brackets that work and they work with an official board and we've got enough and we can get some more official I/O boards, not least because they're cheaper, then we're likely to go down that path wherever we can. If push comes to shove, though, we do have the option of using other boards which didn't suffer from the component shortage as much as the Raspberry Pi one did. It does appear to be cheaper than any other SATA-based RISCOS system at the minute. The cheapest full buy-off-the-shelf system from us is $349. Other systems, I don't think, are in that price range as it stands. And should somebody do the development work, we do have that luxury of it being capable of doing dual screen in the same way, depending on how the development work's done, in the same way as the titanium, or perhaps in the same way as other more popular OSs, I guess, and how they do that. So we do, as I said earlier, have those easy Linux options where you can just pop the card out, pop a new one in, run a different operating system. Where we've tested that, it just thinks that the hard drive for RISCOS, it doesn't understand it. It doesn't try and do anything with it. It just goes, ooh, I don't really know what that is, and ignores it completely, and then just carries on booting Linux. So by just having two SSDs in there, you can run both operating systems by popping out the card. Again, I'll talk a bit more about that later, because that tends to be fiddly just because the card is right round the back of the board, and you kind of have to do it a bit blind unless your board, your system is set up in such a way that you can do that. There is that option for when RISCOS supports it, we can have up to 8 gigabytes of RAM. Currently, I don't think it's there in terms of the ROM, but I do believe the work has been done to allow that. What we do with 8 gigabytes of RAM, I'm really not sure, but it's always nice to have an option. And then we do have that issue when originally we looked at whether we would design a straightforward purpose-built ITX board, and the numbers and the margins and everything that goes with that just means that the I/O boards are just so much cheaper. That made no sense in the long run. It made more sense to just use the one that was being mass-produced and isn't significantly different in its dimensions to, or in one dimension to an ITX board. It doesn't fit straight off the bat, but with sort of fairly simple adapters, it can be made to fit really easily. And as if you'd gone to the Mug Christmas market at the weekend, you would have seen Rule demonstrating where they'd got to with the wireless, because it uses the standard wireless chip. That should make that easier if that comes to fruition. It should be a fairly straightforward thing, assuming, and I'm saying this with some concern, assuming that the stuff that they've done that seems to have broken the SD card or eMMC option doesn't also affect the wireless chip, which it might, and then we might have some issues that we need to iron out. I think it's fair to say for the most part, Rule do seem to be focused very much on, understandably so, on the Pi 4 itself, and the eMMC stuff doesn't affect that. So an SD card in a Pi 4, even with the latest build, just shows up. It's purely compute module based, and whilst they're prioritizing the Pi 4, the compute module does feel a bit like it's slipping a little bit further behind. But so far, we've managed to work out ways around that. It may well be that come the Wi-Fi stuff, whether that works straight away or that there needs to be some extra work done on that, I mean, we'll have to see at that point. So some of the recent developments that we've had, when I say recent, they're not necessarily that recent. We've got the option for big disks. So we can use up to 2 terabyte hard drives in sort of standard file call RISCOS format, and we can use those now. So we've made some internal modifications to how it works with our driver so that we can format drives to 2 terabytes. Most people go for 1 and seem to think that's sufficient. And again, 2 terabytes, I don't know, is that everything written for RISCOS ever 3 times, something like that? It's quite a huge space in terms of what it can do. So generally, people have opted for a 1 terabyte one, because the prices seem much more reasonable in terms of that. But we can do up to 2 terabytes in file core format. We've recently built the option for CD drives into the ROM, and they just work by just plugging them in the usual way into a SATA port on the card, pops up as a CD drive as it would ordinarily, and just works as it would ordinarily. In terms of writing DVDs and stuff like that, it has to be said from my perspective, we haven't really emphasized that because there's a subset of like 2 drives that are available to us that would work according to the CDVD Burn 3 website. And they're very, very rare and very, very expensive. And if somebody really did want a DVD burner, I guess we could provide that, but then there may well be a fairly chunky premium on that because of the number of drives that allow that to work. At one point, we had an issue where the big disks wouldn't work alongside ordinary disks, so you had to choose either a 1 terabyte drive or a 256 gigabyte drive. We've resolved that, so you can have any combination of 3 or 4 of 256, 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte, whatever you wanted to do, and they will work together now. And we've nearly got hats working, although there are some issues around things being switched round on the compute module I/O board, which means that in some cases you can either have GPIO or you can have the camera and display sockets working, but you can't have both at the same time. We've done some work to try and work out where those bits are that need swapping. It doesn't always reap rewards, so we're not sure we've kind of got that right as it stands. And then last time we said over the firmware updates were imminent, and now we've kind of had to hold off on that until we can resolve the issues around whether SD cards appear or eMMC appears or nothing appears, depending on which part of the ROM you're currently on. So we're trying to work out how we get around that. The other thing that occurs sometimes is an SD card will pop up as SDFS0, or it will pop up as SDFS4, or the same with an eMMC. Sometimes it will pop up as SDFS0 or SDFS4, which makes it more difficult for us to work out. And some of that, bizarrely, seems to be board related rather than ROM related, which gets really confusing. It like earlier revisions of different boards kind of makes it a bit more complicated than it needs to be for us in that respect. So we've kind of held back on that for now to give us a bit more leeway and see whether RULE are going to resolve some of the issues about why some things pop up, some things don't, why some SD cards work, why some don't, and why even very small subsets of SD cards don't seem to function as well as we'd want. So some future developments, we've got a board already that may well allow us to support just standard ATX power supplies. And then we're going to try and work out how to do all the other stuff that we come to expect from PC cases. And the board for the ATX power supply should support the on-off switch fairly straightforwardly, but the nice little LEDs and stuff like that may be a bit more complicated, and we may need an add-on for that, but we kind of need to explore that a bit more to see whether there are easier ways of doing that to work alongside the ATX board that we've got and the power supply thing that we can do there. We can't, and nobody else can, at the moment, access the onboard real-time clock and the fan control that's built into the board unless you buy one of Chris Hall's add-on boards that does some of that work, because the real-time clock appears to be on a separate bus to the one that we can see, and the same with the fan control. So you can plug a fan in and it will turn round, but it won't be temperature controlled and you won't be able to adjust that. It'll just be on and doing this. Realistically, we've never found a need for a fan particularly, and a little bit of a fairly chunky heat sink seems to take away as much heat as we really need it to. We are looking at NVMe support, which will give us access to a range of other things, but I'll kind of talk about a bit more about that later. And then some improved eMMC support, but again, we're back to how do we get that through the nightly build, and whilst RULE are prioritising, as again I said, understandably the Pi 4, we're not really on their radar in terms of doing that, so we might have to mitigate some of that for now. We can, as I said, we could produce 2 different ROMs, and if things continue, that may well be the path that we choose to go down, where there'll be a ROM for SD cards and a ROM for eMMC, so that people can use either. And then we have been looking at a couple of smaller footprint options for like a fast mini, which would probably be a 1-disk system rather than a 4-disk system or an up to 4-disk system, just for that ease of carrying around and not being a standard mini ITX type size. It may well be something significantly smaller. So the updates on where we were, we're doing some work on multi-format partition support. Not really getting a fantastic amount of traction with that, because there is no real partition support unless you use system disk. So we may well look at whether we write something to do that, or we may well look at whether we just stop where we are and leave that alone until somebody else picks up that bounty and looks at the partition support in there. As we said, we've done some work around the eMMC support, and we are about 85% of the way there. We're hoping now, we were hoping previously, that 5.3 will stabilize some of that and make it more functional for us. But if again, the focus is understandably on the Pi 4 and not the compute module, and it works on the Pi 4 but not the compute module, that might take us longer than we need to, or we might have to do that 2-ROM solution. Again, the stuff that I mentioned earlier about the full GPIO support, we're about 85% of the work there, the way there. and it's just shifting a couple of bits around, working out which they are, working out which boards do it in which way, and trying to finalise some of that into a fairly robust system. And then, as I will talk about later, in terms of NVMe support, I think we're probably about 95% there in some aspects of that, and potentially that ain't going to take us much longer to do, which, as I said, should open up a world of other things for us to do. The onboard real-time clock support is, we're not really prioritising that because it's currently very, very easy to just plug in a real-time clock onto the GPIO. That much of the GPIO just works. So as long as you use the right real-time clock, it just works now. So for the sake of that, and given that we don't really need a fan, and they would be the two things that we were solving by working out how we were going to use that alternative bus, it's not a priority. I can spend a few quid, plug something in, and we've got past everything we need. So spending a lot of time on that just doesn't seem to make any sense at this point in time. As I said, we've got the ATX board that allows us for full power control. We just need to do a bit more testing on that to make sure that does everything that we want it to. But that should be a fairly straightforward solution. So we're just waiting some more testing on that. How long that takes us is a different matter, because again, it works as is. It'd be marginally neater, but it'd be no more functional. So there's other stuff that we can prioritise in terms of that. And Wi-Fi hat support, we've had Wi-Fi hats working, dependent on those tweaks to the GPIO, and to some degree, that creates us some issues because it's not, as it currently stands, particularly reliable and particularly applicable, no pun intended, across the board. So we're kind of seeing if we can sort of firm that up a bit more to get it to work properly. And then we'll roll that out as soon as we can. And again, over the air upgrades, the mechanism is there in its entirety. It's the eMMC support and which way we roll with that, which will determine whether that pops up sooner rather than later. Because unless we can determine where that firmware update goes with some reliability, that is likely to not be quite as successful as we want it to be. But in general terms, a bit like, I guess, the app for the Ionics, was it called IO Watch or something, that kind of notified you that there was a new ROM available? This does roughly the same kind of thing. It just pops up when you run it to say there is a new ROM or there isn't a new ROM. But we need to be able to control where that ends up at that point when we've done that. So for more information, you can go to our dedicated RISCOSfast.co.uk website, and there are some of the options that are available to just buy off the shelf, really. So the cheapest way in, if you've already got a compute module, an official I/O board, a power supply, hard drive, most of the stuff, we will supply you with the specific SATA hardware device and a configured SD card and access to all future updates, and that's 99 quid. If you want a bit more than that, so you want the card and the hardware device, and you want a 250 gigabyte SSD that will work out of the box, and the adapters to put it into your own case, you'll still have quite a bit of working out to do. And that's 149. And then we'll supply you with a custom case made out of oak and acrylic layers and a power supply on top of that for an extra 50 quid. And then the base system that is the most popular, it has to be said, is 2 gigabytes of RAM, a 2 gigahertz CPU, 250 gigabyte SSD, all built into a nice case with the power supply, everything you need. So it comes out of a box ready to run, and that's all you do, and that's 349. And then the current top of the range model with 4 gigabytes of RAM, 2 gigahertz CPU, and it should say there, and that's right, a 1 terabyte hard drive, optical drive if you want it. Some people do, some people don't. All in a bigger ITX case than the one that we use for the Fire system, and that comes in at 499. So they're kind of the options that are available off the shelf, pretty much. If you buy it now, the definitely the Fire, the Core, and the kit would be in the post by Saturday. The Fury is more, we'll build that to what you need and what you want. Usually people choose to add in another 250 gigabyte SSD with that, and again, some people want the optical drive, some people don't. So there are reductions to be had as well as enhancements to be had with that. So I'll stop there for now because I'm starting to bore myself. Has anybody got any questions at this point before I carry on boring myself?
Yeah, where did the cube fit into that?
Sorry, John?
Where does the cube fit into that set?
I shall come on to that shortly.
Right.
And you might be in for like a bit of good news on what we talked about on Saturday. So you could be really pleased with your purchase all of a sudden. Not that you're not already, obviously.
Oh, it's lovely.
Anybody else got any other question? I'm going to quickly look at the messages that seem to have piled in. That'll teach me not to keep an eye on those. Were there any questions in there that anybody sent or spotted? Speed reading isn't my...
I don't think so, Andy. I've read them all, and they're mostly chit-chat. Like, there are more French people using RISCOS in France than foreign secretaries sent to Rwanda.
Oh, so one then. Anyway.
Oh, there are four French RISCOS users.
Oh, okay then. Yeah,
I
it
think
was all that.
there's about as many Australians, somebody was saying as well.
Yeah, very true. Okay, in which case I shall carry on boring myself. Just bear with me. So we've done that bit. So the next bit is some of the newer stuff that we've talked about, that we looked at, or that you could have looked at if you'd come to the mug show on Saturday. And that when I say newer, I'm specifically saying newer rather than new, because some of them have been around for a while but haven't been seen in the wild until the Saturday just gone. And the first one is John's Pyro Cube, which is a ridiculously tiny little machine, as it says there, 55 mil by 43. So it's not quite a cube, but I didn't want to call it a not quite a cube. That just seemed like a daft name. So I just left it alone as cube. And as you can see from my little diagram there, it has the full range of HDMI ports, 2 USB ports, gigabit Ethernet. It has around the back a 40-pin GPIO that you can access fairly easily. And it can come with either eMMC or SD card. Now, the ones that we took on Saturday were the eMMC ones, just because it's a bit more robust in terms of its storage, and it's a bit more fast. I guess it's faster than that. It does have that NVMe slot. Just bear with me. I thought I'd deleted all the animations and transitions, but clearly not. It does have an internal NVMe slot at the bottom, so you can, as it stands, run Linux particularly quickly just by dual booting in the usual way, and that running it from NVMe is significantly quicker than running it from an SD card. So currently, there is that option for people to do that. The one that I unfortunately left on my kitchen table on Saturday was equipped with a Linux NVMe drive to demonstrate that, but it spent its day on my kitchen table along with some other stuff. It is fairly low power, so I suppose I should have said this. It contains a compute module 4, and it is the size is based on. I get annoyed when it does this on its own. The size is based on the footprint of the compute module rather than anything else. The height, obviously not, but the size of it is based on that. But it will run from a single USB port on a different computer. So it's not a particularly power-hungry machine, and yet it'll run quite nicely at fairly decent speeds without any particular effort. And we do have that option of like switching OSs relatively easily from either eMMC or SD card to NVMe without taking anything apart or doing anything like that. The next one is the eMMC4, which again was at the show on Saturday. And again, that's, as its name suggests, entirely eMMC4 based. There is an option to do it using an SD card. You can probably see from the diagram that there's an SD card slot at the front. On the ones that we're doing, that's just not in use because we've opted for the eMMC. Unlike some of the other machines, the Pi compute module uses either eMMC or SD. You don't have that option of using both. I don't really think that's a particular disadvantage. I suppose it could be if you really wanted to swap stuff around, but for the most part, it's just the way it is and how we manage with that. It comes with 2 HDMI ports, full-sized HDMI ports, 3 USB ports, 2 on the back and 1 on the front, and 1 gigabit Ethernet port. And it has the option of 3.5mm audio in and out, although for us it would be largely out. It has an internal SSD bay, so you can install a standard 2.5-inch SSD drive in the bottom, and the way we're recommending people use it, because the SSD drive is over USB, even though it's internal, it's using one of the USB ports from a USB chip connected to the PCIe slot on the compute module 4. That's why you've got 3 USB ports, I suspect, rather than 4. It uses that. So for us, that's running USB 2 because we don't have that capability of running anything at USB 3. And as much as the port is that nice shade of blue that you might look for on a Windows or a Linux system, it kind of doesn't make any difference. It is just what it is, and it runs at USB 2 speeds. It's smaller than the Pi harder that we did that it ultimately will replace. It's probably 2/3 of the size. Is of roughly the same metal construction. And looks like a fairly decent replacement if you wanted that eMMC option. And it's not significantly more expensive. It obviously has like slightly fewer USB ports, but the advantage of having one on the front is still there. And again, you can boot Linux from the SD card, not the SD card, you could if you wanted, from the SSD that's underneath. Use the 32 gigabyte eMMC for all your RISCOS stuff, and the way we do it is we partition the drive into half FAT32 and half Linux. So you'd have half of the drive for RISCOS using FAT32 and half the drive for Linux. And because it's connected over USB 3 under Linux, that runs at fairly quick speeds. It's just for us, it's not quite so quick, although FAT32, as you'll be aware, is infinitely faster than FileCore. I will show you this now. So the Pi Mini was the new machine that we launched on Saturday, and it's a replacement for the Pi Zero things that we used to do. We had the remaining stocks of those at the show on Saturday, and we won't be doing those anymore because the guy who made the boards that provided the Ethernet and extra USB ports has just decided that he's sold as many of those as he's ever going to, so he's not going to do another run. So this is kind of a replacement for it, except infinitely better. So whereas the Pi Zero ran at, even if you use the Pi Zero 2 at like 1.2, 1.3 gigahertz, this is going to run, or does run, at 2 gigahertz. It has 2 gigabytes of RAM as opposed to the 512 megabytes that you got on the Pi Zero, and it comes as standard with a 32 gigabyte SD card that you could swap for a 64 or a 128 should you really want to, or you can have the 32 gigabyte eMMC option, because as I said earlier when we were talking about the fast stuff, it's just a case of upgrading the compute module inside, and it does have that 1 gigabit Ethernet built in there as well. It also has, in terms of connectivity, one USB port. That's the price we pay for making it so small and so cheap. It has that Ethernet port. It has mini HDMI, but we'll provide you with an adapter to convert it to full size, and a single USB-C port for power only. Now, there is hidden inside the case a 3.5mm audio in and out, but we've made indentations in the case so that you can see where you'd need to drill that hole. But for the time being, we haven't enabled that. But if you're any good with a Black & Decker, I'm not sure that's going to be any particular challenge for anybody. We're currently looking at these as being likely to be a show-only item, and then if there are any stocks left after the show, we might sell those on. And because the case is 3D printed, we've got the options of alternative colours. And one of the things that came up from the show on Saturday was people suggesting, why do you not do an A3000 or an A3020 colour scheme? So, like, I think that's what they were talking about, because they kept talking about a beige bottom. I just assumed that's what it was, and then a red top. So that's why we're going to. Or somebody did say, you could do an A3010 version with a green top. So there are a couple of those left from the show, and then at the next show, it's likely to be a completely different colour, and it is a bit of you take your chance and see what you get at that. And if I show you one of those, I'll just stop sharing that for now. The phrase dinky does just about cover it. It's dinky, and that's it. So, and again, it's fairly low power. It will run from the USB port on another machine quite easily. So somebody described it as being industrial looking, and I kind of like that description. I'm going to stick with that. So currently it's in blue. Next time it may well be in a completely different colour or a completely different set of colours, depending what I think might be appropriate for next time. Okay, I guess while I'm there, I should show you the Cube machine as well, which is, again, not huge, dinky, all the ports there, SD card slot if you're going to use that, and the GPIO on the back. has a fan inside that's currently not temperature controlled, but we're going to aim towards getting that to work like that, and has this really lovely tactile button on the top that you can't see because I'm not showing you, that turns it on and off in a fairly standard way, really, and it makes a lovely mechanical keyboard kind of click on that. But anyway, it's not a keyboard. All right, let me go back to where I was. So some errors on my slide there. So some stuff we've got in the pipeline. The first one is tentatively called the Chimera. We did a bit of a poll because we couldn't decide on a name. We had a couple of options. People made other choices, but Chimera seemed to win in as much as it's got two heads. And if you know your mythology, you'll know that Chimera has two heads. One of them is the head of a goat, or in football terminology, the greatest of all time, which is clearly RISCOS. And the other one is the head of a lion, Linux. I can see that there's a bit of a tenuous link there. And that allows us to run both machines at the same time, with one as a window in the other. And you could, depending on how you connected it up, do that potentially either way around. You could run Linux as the base system and run RISCOS in a window. And it would be native RISCOS rather than emulated. Or you could run RISCOS as the main screen and you could run Linux in a window. And that uses the fast technology, so it's got full speed up to 4 SATA drives in there for RISCOS to use straight off the bat. The Linux elements could use SATA drives, although generally we would probably say if you're going to use RISCOS as your main system and Linux as the one that you use occasionally, just stick with eMMC, or if you really don't want to spend any money, you could stick with SD, but that would be a little bit slower. We do, though, have the option of running Linux from an NVMe drive. That would be ridiculously fast if you were going to do that on that machine alongside the fast element, the SATA element for RISCOS. It's all within a standard mini ITX case, and you could per head have up to 8 gigabytes of RAM, although as we've said for RISCOS that wouldn't work yet. You can have 2 gigahertz plus CPUs, dedicated storage for each one, eMMC options for each one, whatever you wanted to do. It's fairly adjustable as much as you want. And we can integrate the use of other systems in that. So we've been dabbling with doing one that is RISCOS fast for the main head, and not Windows on ARM, but actual x64 Intel style Windows on another head, and then you could swap between as you wanted, or run one in the window on another fairly easily. We've been dabbling with the board this week, trying to get that to fine tune that as much as we can, and I think we've kind of got it to a point where that is fairly smooth. There is a bit of a, sorry about that, there's a bit of a premium obviously on the Windows head if you wanted to go down that path, because that hardware costs more in terms of getting that built in. But in terms of Linux, it's a relatively cheap option for a dual head machine without particularly breaking anybody's bank. And it does work fairly smoothly. Again, that spent Saturday on my kitchen table, along with a couple of other machines that I'd inadvertently, and I'm blaming the rain, the dark, my dogs, everything. But whatever else happened, I left that rucksack on the kitchen table. And the text message when I arrived was, "Did you get out there okay?" "Yes, I did, thank you. I'm just unpacking." "Did you need this rucksack?" Yes, I did. Never mind. It's a 180-mile round trip to fetch it. I think I'll leave it now and manage without. So into the beyond then. What are we going to do in future? So one of our main plans is to make all of our current Pi 4 and future systems at least have the option of eMMC storage built in, so that robustness and that marginal extra speed is there. So some systems we are likely to retire in the not too distant future, although if I spoke to you at the show, and I probably told you that somebody suddenly from nowhere came up and said they wanted to buy 40 of one particular machine that I'd intended to retire. So obviously I'm not going to do that anytime soon. That's not going in the cupboard, never to return. And it's not within our usual market. It's somebody from a commercial setting who suddenly decided that they wanted to use something else, and they wanted 40. And when I picked myself up off the floor, I thought I would see how much that'll work out at them. And they did seem quite keen, but they've more workings out to do. We're going to try and make as many things as we can user upgradable wherever possible, by maybe converting them to compute modules or whatever, and try and integrate more Linux stuff within it. With the Chimera machine, one of the things that we have managed to do is to generate a way where it can load up when you want it to, just load up a particular app from within Linux rather than the whole Linux thing on screen. It just loads up OpenOffice if that's what you want, or whatever else it is that we can set it up to do. And that makes it feel a bit more integrated than loading up Linux. But it's also, there are some real niggles with how that works. It's a bit of an experimental thing, in that some of those applications just seem to resize themselves at random, and there's nothing you can do about that. So you end up with huge borders on Windows, or it spews off to one side and you can't see what's going off over there. So we've got to work on why that's doing that and what's happening there. We may well look at new platforms that we can work alongside. So one of the things that we've been looking at is the Banana Pi and what that does, and more specifically the Orange Pi. And the Orange Pi 5 Plus looks really nice and does seem to be a fairly speedy machine. One of the things that we've come across when we've tried alternative platforms is, if you're used to the Raspberry Pi and the Linux that provides, everything else just seems a little bit clunky in comparison. And some of that is we're used to how that looks and things like that. But I spent hours trying to flash an Orange Pi with its operating system using the tools that they provided, to no avail, thinking, oh, it's just me and I don't know what's happening here and I'm not really sure. You do a bit of looking on the internet and everybody else has said, we can't get this to flash anything. So there are some risks with that in as much as, I guess in a nutshell, they just don't seem to work, and they're not quite as well supported. The one thing I think that the Raspberry Pi has going for it that the others just can't replicate is that support that you get from the wider millions of community members, rather than it being down to one company and a few people on a forum that is mainly difficult to understand, and they either assume massive levels of technological understanding, or they assume that you understand Chinese, which doesn't really work for me. And then the other thing that we're looking at is we're going to develop some more specific hardware for use with RISCOS. We've got a couple of things in mind that we want to do that, if I'm being absolutely honest, we've shelved for the time being to see where the Raspberry Pi 5 goes and what comes out of that, because there may well be ways we can integrate and work alongside that, and that may be a better option for us than using things like the Banana Pi or the Orange Pi or whatever those other flavoured pies are. And as I say, there is that advantage in the level of support and understanding that's out there for the Raspberry Pi that you don't seem to get with anything else. And then the other thing that we showed off at Mug was NVMe. So we've got NVMe working. It's very nearly ready. There's some optimizations that we need to do, but even with the basic unoptimized model, it's about as fast is. That sounds way more confusing when you say it out loud. It's about as fast as the SATA stuff we do that we call fast. In terms of benchmarking, in terms of how it feels, how it works, it seems to be at that speed. And currently, I'll show you in a minute, currently it's not optimized in any way. We've just got it to the point where it's working successfully, repeatedly, and fairly robustly. And now we can tweak it a little bit to get a bit more speed out of it, to get it to do more things in the background and things like that. And the implications of that are it opens up a whole new range of things, new machines and boards and things that we can do in our fast range, be those ITX sized or be those not quite Pi Mini sized, but tiny things that will use NVMe and give us a real size to power ratio that we haven't got really as it stands. It also, this is the bit for you, John. As I said, when I was talking about the Pyro Cube with Linux and having the NVMe slot on the bottom, that works with our NVMe driver pretty much now. Currently, we're not building a ROM with it, but it's not going to take much work, and we'll be able to boot from the NVMe drive in the Pyro Cube. Even now, we can use it as really fast storage. So there are other systems that we've got, like the eMMC4 has an NVMe option. So that one can suddenly move away from that USB 2 speed SSD to something that's NVMe speed. And if you're wondering about that, I will show you that in a minute. There are some limitations around NVMe. NVMe appears to be a ridiculously complex bag of mashings, really, in terms of how it does things and different things that it can do. And we're back to some degree, we're back to Acorn times where not all drives work. Some drives work straight out of the box. Some drives need marginal tweaks. Some just go, I don't think so. We're just not going to do that. You can forget about that. And because NVMe is clearly way more mature than our driver, it's working out the different levels of NVMe and what they can do, and whether in the end we'll opt for a subset of drives that we can say these work with our driver. Pick one of those. We're not going to necessarily be in a place where we go buy it from us at a vastly inflated price, but we'll say these are the options that you've got. These are the ones that you can try. These seem to work. So try and avoid, I think, was it the Western Digital ones that didn't used to work on Acorns particularly well? And bizarrely, one of the ones that we can't get to work is a Western Digital one. But hey ho, they've obviously got something against RISCOS altogether. So I can show you, I think, if my network hasn't died, I can show you the NVMe drive in action over VNC. Let me just show you that. I've tried to do it on a lower resolution just to stop it being really painful at my end. But you should be able to see kind of things. Yeah, you should. Can you see what looks like a fairly standard RISCOS screen there?
Yes, yes.
Good out. And you can see the cursor moving there. So there's my sort of standard SD card, the test one that I'm currently using. We haven't done the filer module as yet, so we're having to run it from a self-generated app just to get it to work as it stands. But if let me see, I'll copy some videos from SD card there. I'll count them first so that you can see what kind of size they are. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I'm trying to run that one, in fact. Let me just stop that. I kind of forgot which way around my mouse keys work, so I'm on the wrong machine. So if I count that, you can see that that's roughly about 0.5 gigabyte in size. So I'll write that from SD card to RAM, and you can all go and have a cup of tea. Well, perhaps not a cup of tea, but you're going to notice it. You remember RISC PCs? Turned mine on the other day and loaded NetSurf and just forgot how long it took to get to the icon bar. Anyway, so they're in RAM now. So I'll open the NVMe drive. They're already there, so I'll delete them because that would be cheating.
So,
and I'll copy those 0.5 gigabytes worth of files from RAM to NVMe. And there you go. So the speed increase and the speed increase going back, those, this time. It's fairly nippy stuff in terms of it. It is, when we tested it, it's roughly about the same as fast, and fast has already been optimized. NVMe, we haven't done that bit of work yet, so we're hoping we can get some more speed out of that. Although I'm coming to the point where I'm just thinking, do we need to? Is it doing as much as we're ever going to need it to do? It all seems to work fine. Again, one of the tests that seems to be common is the bit about how quickly you can scan through a PDF. So I'll do that, and well, there's just no lag. The lag that you can see is through VNC rather than anything else. It just does whatever it needs to do as quickly as it needs to do. So it is, as my granddad would have said, something off a shovel in terms of how quickly it'll do stuff now as it stands. We've also got, as an example, I'll show you this. I'm not sure whether this will work. It should do. We've got a modified H form, so you can see that one of the options there is to format the NVMe drive rather than just the standard SCSI or SDFS. We did have some issues with that, where we couldn't really get that to work, and we were always getting stuck at about, regardless of the settings that we used, about 2.5 gigabytes formatting properly. And while I was at the show, on Saturday, the guy writing the stuff for me just emailed me and said, I think I've cracked it. What was the issue? And he said, I needed to change 3 ifs for while, and now it just works perfectly. And he'd spent a good couple of weeks staring at it, thinking, what on earth is wrong? And then just took a punt on changing these ifs for whiles, and suddenly it did everything he needed to do. And from that point on, we were having issues, which is why disk night is on the SD card. It was throwing up issues every so often with things, whereas now, it's already there. Again, that just does it as it wants to. It works. It is so the drive in here now it's a 256 gigabyte one. So obviously, by the time you formatted it down, you don't quite get all of that, but it's coming in at 238 gigabytes, and just works. So pretty much, as he said, he needs to write a filer module, do a few optimizations, a few more tests on things, make sure it's robust, test a few more drives, but we've already got like a database of drives we can use. Expand that a little bit, or get to a point where we just say, oh, do you know what, that'll do, we'll be all right at that. Here's 20 you can choose from, or here's 10 that you can choose from that are fairly widely available. Just use one of those. But currently, that's where we're at. So I reckon he reckons any time early in the new year, and this should be good to go. And we'll roll it into a ROM, use it as a bootable filing system, and we're all good for a whole range of machines that we can currently either not use at all or only partially use, that will suddenly be potentially, which is why I questioned myself earlier about fast being the fastest RISCOS machine in the world for now. And there's a risk, no pun intended, that this may be even faster than fast. So I'm not sure whether I'm going to have to rename fast to quite nippy or do something else. So that's where we're at with that. That's kind of, like I said, 95% ready to go. We've just got those final few bits. Let's see if we can make it a bit faster. Roll it into a ROM, and we're good to go. And that should, as I said, open up a whole range of different things that we can do in terms of the speed of some of the stuff that we've currently got. We were a little bit surprised, I think, a bit like we were with Fast. We were a little bit surprised at how well that went and how well it did the things that it did. And we made a conscious decision to, as you'll notice there, to write a specific NVMe FS rather than roll it into one of the filing systems that already exists. We thought that might confuse matters, especially in terms of Fast, where everything's on ADFS. If we wanted a machine where both were capable at the same time, then we clearly needed to have a different name rather than trying to roll it into ADFS and it getting really confused when there's a SATA drive and an NVMe all on the same machine. Although I would say in mitigation, Malud, that I'm not sure why you'd want to do that. That does just seem a little bit overkill. I guess there could be a good reason. I can't think what it is off the top of my head. Anybody got any questions on that?
I have a question, please, Andy.
Yep.
You might be expecting this one, I don't know. Who is the programmer on this? The same as the person who developed Fast for you?
No.
Right. Okay.
No, he was doing something else, so we had to go elsewhere.
Okay.
Any others?
Yeah, can't remember seeing any prices on the two smaller computers that you did last. I don't know if you.
Yeah, I haven't put those up. They're on the, and I can't remember. I could look on my phone, I suppose.
Oh,
that might
they're on the website. I'll look on the website.
They are on the website. Yeah. The one, the Pyro, the Cube one is significantly cheaper than, not significantly cheaper, but a fair bit cheaper than the eMMC 4 one. The advantage is that I guess at this point the Pyro Cube has the option of the NVMe driver without any modifications. It should just drop in. The shooting himself in the foot here, the eMMC 4 one would need some changes, which would make that one significantly more expensive to modify for NVMe at that point. So that would make it.
Okay.
You might want to consider that, should I say?
Yeah.
That one is not on the website or anything.
Progress.
It's 99 quid. Anyway.
Oh, right. You said it's going to be shows only, probably. Yeah.
I've got a couple left from this show, and I won't do blue again next year. So if you really did want to, what I refer to, just for my dad's benefit, as Manchester City blue, if you really did want a Manchester City blue one, then I've got a couple of those left, and that'll be my lot. If they don't go, then my dad will just have two that he doesn't really want or know what to do with, and they'll end up propping up a table.
Well, there'll be special limited editions for the next show, surely.
Well, maybe, could be, but depends. And I may have ordered some beige filament already, you never know. But have I ordered red or green? That's the question you've got to ask yourself.
Andy, I've got as much a question as a suggestion or a discussion. Why don't you put VNC server on and run it automatically?
I do. It's just the VNC server front end thing. I don't turn it off in case I need to make changes to it. That's all. So it does. You
mean the cube that I bought?
Oh, sorry. On your. Oh, yeah. No. In case you don't want it. But yeah.
Yeah. I might not want it, but it's not easier to turn it off than it is to find a screen, a keyboard, and a mouse and a pad.
It's a very good point. Yeah. I guess, it would be an easier way to put it on there and let you turn it off, wouldn't it? Than
it certainly would.
Let you dig around for it and find it. It should be somewhere on the disk. I think it's in network, but
it is on there, but it wasn't running, and I had to. Well, it's not terribly painful, but a good hour or so sorting out. And finding a working screen and working keyboard and working mouse that's not in use without robbing other machines.
Bizarrely, that suggestion makes perfect sense, and I will do that from now on. So every machine I sell, I'll have to send you a tenner, I suspect. Compensation for that. Royalties. I don't sell any at all, ever.
I've got another thing, which is, you may have a comment on. I run about 4 or 5 RISCOS machines in this room.
Yeah.
In order so I don't have to move around too much. They all run VNC servers, and I watch them all on this nice big screen I've now got from Andrew. One of them switches itself off, the others don't, and it's the cube. It times out. Now, I don't think I've done anything different in the way of settings. The others don't time out, but the cube one times out at random, it seems to me. It ran all night last night, but it timed out this morning.
Do you mean the machine itself or just the VNC?
No, just the VNC session.
Which VNC server are you using? The one that was on there?
Maybe the one. The same level.
I don't think it should. I tend to use Steve Potts front end because that makes it much more configurable, and that's on there in network, I think.
Yeah, I don't use that. I understand it's sort of a bay file which puts things on and runs things at boot. It starts up VNC server, but it is
right.
It's the modern Jeffrey Lee one. But
Yeah, I'm currently using 0.22. I can't understand why it times out. That does seem a bit odd.
It does. That's okay. I just thought if you might know.
Yeah, I'll have a dig around and see what I can see, but I've not become aware. And some of mine stay on for months on end, only, as you said, attached by VNC without that issue. So that's a bit peculiar in that respect.
Yeah. Okay. Not a big deal. I thought you might have an angle on it.
No, sorry, not as yet. Any other questions? Or are you just waiting for the quiz? I mean, maybe you just came along for the quiz. Oh, this is academic. I'll take that as you just came along for the quiz then and just move on, eh? Right, let me try and explain this because this is complicated, sort of. I just thought we'd do something a bit different rather than the standard kind of approach to stuff. And that isn't it. Okay. Oh, I better talk about this, I suppose. Yeah. And one of the other things that we started doing just before Saturday with the intention of launching it on Saturday was the ROADS scheme. So the RISCOS Active Developers Scheme, in recognition of, I think, the fact that as people who have been particularly good to us in terms of software and things like that are retiring or not updating stuff or drifting off or not doing things in the way that they used to, because there's, I guess, not as much in it for them as they used to be. It was about recognising that, I think, about recognising that and sort of giving them something back whilst giving them the tools that they might want to use to develop some newer stuff. As somebody said, and I can't remember who it was, on Twitter, I think, they were using the fast machine as their main development tool because all the things that it did so much faster meant everything for them worked faster and they were much more productive. I didn't want the ROADS scheme to be purely about here by a fast machine. So there are a range of options on there, and we've kind of offered, I would say, as much discount as we reasonably can, given the margins on some of those things. So some things have a 50% discount, especially where we're kind of wanting people to contribute to that a little bit if they can. Some things are, the discount is lower, but the average is around 12.5% to 15% on what we normally sell things for. One of the conditions of that, though, is if you're overseas, we'll do the same price, but you've got to accept that there will be a bit of a surcharge on postage for stuff, because A, you'll pay more in postage, and then B, when it gets to you, somebody's going to run around trying to get some extra money off you for customs and VAT and all that kind of stuff, and it's very difficult for us to avoid that, really. So that might make a difference to how people from abroad view it in that respect. But we thought we'd be upfront and say, look, we're going to have to, if it costs us 20 quid to post it to you in Brazil, spurious claim, we'll charge you 20 quid. We won't charge you 25 quid, but nor can we afford to charge you the 7 quid that it cost us to post it here. So there may well be a surcharge, and then there may well be that surcharge when it gets to the other end, that overseas government adds on because they want to. And it is just about encouraging people to either write new software that we can all use. That they could choose to sell it, that's up to them. We're not being specific about whether that software has to be free or open source or anything. They could write it and sell it. Or they update some of the stuff that they wrote in 1997 that they kind of got a bit fed up of, and moved away from RISCOS and now do stuff for other operating systems, but are considering sticking their toe in to see how much warmer or colder the water is as it stands. So we were trying to encourage those people, as well as, I know there's, although I've never been, there's the Saturday fireside chat thing for people who do coding, and I'm aware that I think some of those people aren't coders but are interested. So there's a bit of an option there for people who are just users of the operating system and want to get into coding, for them to access stuff a bit cheaper to make that a bit more possible if that's what they want to do. And then if there are those people who code on a different operating system altogether and want to have a look at what we do, it gives them an opportunity to do it a bit cheaper than they could normally do it. Obviously, all these people could just go off and buy a Raspberry Pi 4 and program an SD card and do that. That might not give them all the tools that they need. So we've provided like quite a few tools around programming and things like that, and other things that make that a little bit easier if they're brand new to programming on RISCOS, or they're brand new to programming in any way, shape or form. For the people who've done it before, still do it, or thinking about coming back, then those tools are still there, but they might not need them as much as those people who've done that. And all we're asking for people is to fill in a form, just so that we know it's genuine. We'll have a look at their website, see if they're telling us what apps they've got are actually there. And it, from my perspective, it might help us see something that we'd never stumbled across before or found. So there's a bit of something there in for me, like, oh, that looks really interesting. I didn't know we had something that did that. So people can come back that way. And once they've given us their information and we've checked it, we give them a specific username and password for another part of the website, and they're away, and we pretty much don't keep their information because there's not a lot of point. I did consider, obviously, selling it on to people, and when I said that there could be upwards of 4 RISCOS programmers' details here, they went, what? And weren't really that interested. So no, I didn't consider selling it on because I'm not sure there's a market for it, and we're just likely to delete it, especially if people say, could you delete it when you've done with it? And that's where we'll go with that. So that was the idea behind that, is just to give those people who want to do RISCOS programming a cheaper way of getting updated hardware or some of the latest things that they might want to do, to be able to do that. And then, yeah, the last bit then that I'm going to do is, I don't know why I volunteered to do this, and nobody even asked me, I just kind of said it. I'm going to do a bit of a quiz for you in a very slightly seasonal, slightly RISCOS, Acorn kind of related way, but in a way that I will suspect you've not done before. So it's going to be an online quiz. So you will need, like I said earlier, you'll need a browser, a fairly capable browser. Iris will do it just about, but you're probably better off on a different operating system. The really easy way, though, is to do it on your mobile phone if your mobile phone is internet capable. Load up a browser, and I'll go through this again. Go to menti.com and then put in that code when it asks you, and it will bring up a screen that I'll show you in a minute. It will then tell you that you've got to enter your name, and it'll kind of half filled it in with something that's really stupid but related to the icon that's above it. If you want the prize, I'll show you what the prize is in a minute. You'll have to put your real name in, so I know genuinely who's won. And I can only apologise. I've tried for ages to change the little pictures, the avatars that came with it, and you just can't. You're stuck with the one it offers you when you put your name in, and there's not a lot you can do about that. So if you're a unicorn, I apologise. If you're ET, I apologise. If you're a lion, well, you might be quite happy with that.
Just one little thing, Andy.
Yep.
I just pulled up that URL on my phone.
Yeah.
And Bitdefender is not happy.
Is it not?
Immediate action is required. Your device has been compromised. Now, it might just be a bit paranoid, actually. So
it definitely is. We use that quite a lot at work.
Yeah.
And they lock down everything, but it doesn't seem to have any problems with that at all.
Yeah. It's just I'm flagging it up just in case somebody else sees it and is alarmed.
Yeah. Okay, so prior to each question, you get a bit of a countdown so you can prepare yourself, because you've only got 15 seconds to answer the question. You get points for choosing the right answer. That it'd be a pretty rubbish quiz if that didn't happen. But you get more points if you choose the right answer quickly. So speed is of the essence when doing this. And then throughout the quiz, we'll have a bit of a leaderboard to see who's currently winning, who's currently losing, who's turned the computer off and gone home, all that kind of stuff to see what's happening.
Quick correction, it wasn't Bitdefender that flagged that up. It was actually Google's own security.
Well, what do they know?
Nothing really.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to try and share this screen with you now. Well, I can remember how we do.
Mine has come up in Spanish, I think. It says mentis, no, and abogados de caídas.
That's, again, odd. It should just say menti.com.
There's menti.co at the top.
Menti.com.
Yes, I missed out the M.
So just bear with me while I load up the thing and then run it so that you don't see all the...
You've taken away the code number, so I can't join.
I will show you that shortly. Just bear with me on that one. I'm waiting for it to start itself up.
Oh, yes, I've got a Mentimeter now.
Yeah.
Enter the code. Yeah.
Okay, it's faffing me about. Just bear with me. This works. I'll eat my hat, but I'll at least give it a go. All right, so you should be able to see a screen that says quiz time.
No. Yes.
Yep. And the code, if you wanted to do it, is at the top there. So it's 1723 9142. Which you'll be pleased to know, the second part of that is the code to my bike lock from when I was about 15. Purely coincidental and of no use to you because I haven't got the bike or the lock. So, as I said, is everybody there who wants to be?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9 players ready to go. All right then. Is there anybody still waiting to do it? Nope.
You've got to enter your name first.
Yeah. I'll give you a couple of minutes to get to this point. And as I said, it'll count down till you can see or till you can answer the question. You'll be able to see the question. It'll count down till you can answer the question. And it's multiple choice. So you have to pick one from the 5 answers that you've got. The quicker you get it right, the more points you get. If that makes sense. If you do it really slowly and you try and Google it, you won't win.
So being multiple choice, I can't put into the answers then?
You can't know. I planned that, bearing in mind you'd be here. You might well look at it and think that's a silly answer anyway, so it might not matter. All righty then. So I'm assuming everybody's ready. I'm going to go for the first question. Okay. Okay. So 8 of you got it right.
What?
Somebody clearly panicked. So let's see how we go on with the next one. Oh, 10 players ready now. Oh, that's good. Okay. Okay, let's see what happened there. Ooh, so 5 of you got it right.
Nope.
5 of you got it wrong. So I think we should have a quick check on the leaderboard after this to see what's happening. So currently, Vince is out in the lead.
Ooh.
It's early days, though. It's early days. Don't panic. People could be coming up the inside lane. Let's see what happened. Bit concerned about Pingu, but never mind. Generally a bit concerned about Pingu whenever I've seen him on telly. So let's see. There's Pingu again, nicely. Oh, 5 of you got that right. No, I thought Matilda were quite a nice name for that, but you can see where some of you might have got been led astray on that one, if I'm honest. It's all right. There's only 140 questions. It shouldn't take that long. Some people knew that one. They think some people might go for Rolf, though, but not in the Rolf Harris kind of way, obviously. All right, let's see where I go. I'll be impressed if you all get this. Stroke assume you're cheating.
He misclicked on that one.
A likely story. Oh dear, you see. Only 3 of you there. I didn't know that off the top of my head. I clearly had to look that up. But
It was 50-50 on that one, wasn't it?
why that 10th player always comes in a bit later. I'm not sure what's happening with that. Assuming this is going to be largely guesswork or somebody's starting it up really quickly. Oh no, right, I'm impressed. 50 there. I'm expecting you all to know this, clearly. Only half. Very consistent, though. We should be due a leaderboard any time soon to see what's happening. Oh, somebody's not. Oh, there we go. Not somebody gone home, but they're not there already.
No idea.
The only thing that made me buy one.
No, I've got it wrong in that case.
Yeah, 99 quid it was.
Yeah.
I still took it right to the wire in case I didn't really want it. Okay, interesting. That's all I'm going to say there. Just interesting.
Yeah,
I don't do Christmas knowledge.
4 of you clearly don't.
Humbug.
Ho ho. Was it ha ha?
Oh, there. Oh, see, now we'll see where we are. Ooh, Alan's out in the lead. What, Vince? What's happened? You were doing so well.
One misclick, a couple of ones I guessed,
7
and
questions.
yeah, there was a misclick. There was a couple I didn't know, so I just guessed and guessed wrong, and of course the Christmas one, which I just didn't know at all. So,
Well, there's still plenty of time, and there's only 10 more Christmas questions. No, we're in.
I keep clicking on questions over the last 2 or 3, and it tells me that you've already responded to this question.
Oh, I don't.
But then it does tell me afterwards, once the question ends, whether I've got it right or wrong. So,
Oh, right, okay. It's just a fix. Okay, well, didn't do very well on that one, did we?
Ada Lovelace used to live down the road from here, but not in my lifetime.
Still the wrong answer.
Yeah.
There's even a new housing development called after her.
Yeah, somebody's definitely gone home now. Oh, no, there we go.
Oh my God.
You could do maths, but you're going to have to be pretty good.
None of the above.
Well, that's impressive. Was it guesswork?
Are you
Bit of that.
It would have been for me.
6 13s, I think.
I'm listening to you all singing it feverishly in your head.
I didn't know, so I just went for a prime number.
Right then. for a bonus point that doesn't really count for toffee because I can't add it onto your scoreboard, do you know how many presents you would get all together over the 12 days?
Simple maths, isn't it? But I can't get my head into gear at the moment.
Good. You can all look that up later. No, it's 364. And we've got a leaderboard. Let's see what's happening. Oh, now then. Cam's moved to top of the list. Because he's in an aeroplane, I suspect that's cheating, really.
It is, definitely.
Oh, come on, you must know this off the top of your head.
Oh, dear.
So, do this. Oh, just.
Well, three of you did, it seems.
I don't like this game.
On bright side, there's only 5 questions to go.
Mm. 6 people got it right.
Still got the mouse mat somewhere.
I remember it.
I think I may have a mug. I'm not sure.
I've got nice maths, so I really shouldn't have got that wrong.
Oh, got it. 17.
You have to, if you get this wrong, you have to go back and watch the Micro Men all over again. You have to be busy on iPlayer then.
Ah, damn. 1 year. I bought
Yeah,
mine.
it was only 1 year, John.
I bought mine in 79. You see. I must have waited 6 months.
Oh, it's all changing. Is it still Kev? Kev's still out in front. It's that aeroplane.
Keep him back up.
I noticed that boat's getting faster. Now that crocodile's behind it, though.
Mouse.
No. There was a cheat there.
Yeah,
That was rotten, that was. That was absolutely rotten. That was stinking, that one.
Well, that's amused me no end.
I'm a monster. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't see you doing that in teleprogram, but hey ho.
I'm going to
hate
forever
you,
refer
Mark.
to him as that now.
I hate you, Marks. I hate you.
Sorry.
I'll get you back.
Let's see what's happening. Oh, it's going to be between Kevin and Vince, I think. Me. Oh, Kevin, Chris.
Yeah, I had a bit of mouse trouble on that one, so it took me a little bit longer to answer than it should have done. So
Sounded a bit like that fella off on the buses, Ruth. Oh, I hate you, Butler.
Yeah, that's sort of the idea.
oh, stop doing that, you stupid mouse. Stay where you are. Yeah.
I need 2 questions to go. Leaderboard every time now, just to make sure.
Gosh.
I got one a bit wrong.
233. Yeah, that's what came to mind. I didn't click it.
Okay, let's see where
I would have first thought always.
Oh, it's neck and neck at top end there.
Oh yes.
And at the bottom too.
That's the last one, is it? Yeah.
I think
There's two more. I think you've got 19 and 20 to go.
Yeah.
And so far, every time it says answer fast to get the question, and none of the answers have been fast.
Means answer quickly.
I know.
I should have done that.
Oh.
Careful. Nobody went for the first one.
Hooray, I got one.
And a few people that would probably think that was the correct answer for a different reason, though.
Yeah. Those who didn't get the deposits back. So let's. Oh, the aeroplane's gone out into a lead. I don't know what happened to Rob Andrews there. Oh, thought I was going to cross him out. Seems harsh. Last question then. Make or break on this one. Well, just break generally.
The Christmas one, isn't it?
Okay, it's a bit of a tricky one, this.
God, who knows?
I can see where you're thinking, though. But any one of those would have done. Let's see what difference it made to the leaderboard at the end. Okay, yeah, there is a genuine prize, so I'll show you that in a minute. But if you're the winner, send me your email address and I'll post it. I do hope it's not the Australian visitor, because that's going to cost me a bloody fortune. And they'll not get it at any point before Christmas, I want to imagine. Well, you all got it right, so well done there. Now we just see who were fastest. Kev Smith wins. On an unassailable 10,280 points. I have no idea how it works out that number, but let's not worry.
Well done, Kev.
Yeah, so if you drop me your email address in the chat, direct to me, and I'll copy it down, and you win. Let me stop sharing my screen. You win a fantastic, I would say that though, wouldn't I?
Yeah.
Limited edition. Definitely limited edition, because I've only made one. It's a special Pyro Noir 3B. As opposed to it being a Pi 4, it's a 3B. There's only one of these in existence, as far as I can imagine. So save it. Don't like just bin it.
No, what?
Save it, because it could be worth something one day. I don't know what, but it could be worth something one day.
Excellent.
It'll be worth a cup of tea to somebody.
It will, yeah. But probably not much more, if I'm honest.
I'm going to be grumpy now and say all of the three mouse that are sitting around here are going in the bin, and I'm buying a new one.
You want mice? I've caught 27 in my garage in the last few weeks.
Yeah, today was the first day. No, it wasn't. The second day I've switched the computer on since Saturday, and the mouse. There's two over here. These are the two. These are the two that went to the show with me. One of them was the one on this desk. When I plugged it in, started using it, it was behaving weirdly. So I tried the other one. It's behaving weirdly. So I found a third one, and it's behaving weirdly.
Must be the socket.
Okay. It might be. It's probably either the little hub thing or the combinator thing.
Unlikely.
I would imagine. Because if I plug it straight into the computer, it does work fine. It's just my screen's gone funny.
If you bought one of the original Raspberry Pis, one of the 10 that were auctioned, what would one of those be worth? I got to 200 quid and backed out. I think the first one went for about £3,000.
Beyond that, I had nothing more to say. The quiz was the end of it for me.
That was good. Thanks
That
for
was
that.
interesting. Shows how much little knowledge. I actually met the people in Bridge Street, Cambridge, before they actually released the Acorn. Before they released the BBC Micro, I had to go and see Acorn to help them with a particular bit of the project, and then was taken up to Bridge Street to meet the people who mattered.
Was Clive Sinclair stood outside protesting?
No. Well, actually, what I did do, though, I saw the letter that Clive Sinclair wrote to the BBC. I had, for some unknown reason, the file ended up on my desk. And he said, words to the effect, your specification for a computer is absolutely ridiculous. I wouldn't dream of tendering for it. Tell you what, I'll let you put your name on one of my machines. Now, that may not be that was being publicised, but that's what he actually wrote.
Yeah.
Salty much?
He was doing a very nice radio receiver you could make and put in a matchbox at the time.
I remember that.
He also made an audio amplifier that, 10% distortion at 1 watt instead of 1% distortion at 10 watts. Oh, we tested.